This is the quarry on Easter Island. This is where most of the moai were freed from the rocks. They were carved out of the ground and their spine was released from the rock, and they were lifted by ropes, pulleys and initially rollers. But it's controversial as how to these moais were actually moved many miles to their a'u, their ceremonial platforms. And legend has it that they were walking moais. And in recent times it's been surmised that because of the rounded bottoms of the bases, the convex bases, when the moai were stood up and attached to ropes, they were made to waddle many kilometers around the island to their present sites. Rapa Nui is the Polynesian name for Easter Island, Isla de Pascua in Spanish. It's formed from an extinct volcano with three craters. One's in the north, one's in the southeast, and one's in the southwest. The southwest is the most picturesque. This island is haunting with mystic beauty. It was once luxuriantly tree covered. It was discovered Easter Sunday, and this is Easter Sunday, so that's why I'm here. Easter on Easter Island on Easter Sunday. It was discovered by the Dutch in 1722. The first settlers came here and they landed on the northeast beach, which is the main beach on the island, and they created a civilization which has now vanished due to environmental economic suicide of self-destruction. Easter Island is one of the most isolated inhabited islands on the planet. It's roughly 2,300 miles from the mainland of South America off Chile, and the main town is called Hangaroa, and everything is imported by air. Some things are imported by ships, such as the heavy materials such as motorbikes and cars. So by 1000 AD the settlers arrived. They made au ceremonial platforms, and the top knots on these moai were brought from another quarry because the stone is reddish in colour. There's about 800 statues. Many of them have been re-erected. One theory was that they were dismantled to give the population more work to do to keep them under control. Most of them gaze inland. Does that mean an inward-looking society, I wonder? There was an expanding population with limited replenishable resources. The destruction of the forest had occurred by 1500 AD. There was poor soil and a few crops were growing here. Some of the crops were grown in holes in the ground, big craters. There were 20 species of trees when the settlers arrived. And war broke out between certain clans and tit-for-tat raids, and they toppled the statues, and there was violent conflict. And many of these idols are lying face down in the ground. There were actually 16 million trees when humans arrived here. There's not many trees here. Most of the trees here are now because they've been imported. Captain Cook was here in 1744, but white man brought disease. The slave traders coming from Peru decimated the population, because even when some of the freed slaves returned, they brought back diseases. So Europeans had destroyed much of the population. Chile annexed the island in 1888 on a forced treaty basis. The island now has about 85,000 visitors per year. There's more coming each year, and development is controlled and it's developing at a slow pace, but it's a noticeable pace, because right here now I had to pay to come into this park. Beforehand you could just walk in, and I was the only person here in those days. Now my ticket only allows the likes of me to visit for one visit per site. And this view behind me I have framed on my bedroom wall at home, so if you do come to Rapa Nui, this is one of the most photographic spots. Gracias por mirar, thank you. This is a fine example of a moai in the making. On the right end of the picture is the nose, the chin and the face, and here on the left is the base. So the men would chip away, gradually releasing the moai from the ground, and the last part to be freed was the spine. And this is the quarry. Here, this moai would be made at the end of the civilization because it was unfinished. This little video clip shows you a moai being carved from the upper reaches of the volcano. If you look up the rock in front of the camera, you'll come to the chin and to the nose. So eventually the sides of the moai would have been formed where the arms would have reached the belly. The moai would have been freed underneath its spine and lifted. It was one of the last ones made, of course, because it hasn't been freed. It was one of the last made before the civilization crumbled. This is tourism on Easter Island. When I was here 9 years ago, I was the only person at this site. I met a Connaught Park ranger, saw 2 wild horses. That was it. I could just walk in any way I wanted from the road. Now you got to come up a trail through a pay-as-you-go turnstile. Easter Island is now in the lower reaches of stage 2 of tourism. So still pretty pleasant to come here, but it takes a long time now to take photographs without people obliterating the scene if you're looking for heritage pictures to photograph free of tourists. I like to call myself a traveller, not a tourist. But of course, if you stay away from home for more than 1 or 2 nights, according to the GCSE geography textbook or travel and tourism, you are a tourist. But I don't want to be branded with a snappy, camera-totting tourist. I might sound like a snob, but I think that travelling in big groups tends to block the views for any nice pictures. I think that when people are walking around in 1s and 2s, it's more scenic, especially if they wear paler colour clothing. So this is tourism, lower stage of stage 2. Development will continue here on Easter Island, so get here as quickly as you can. It's like Cuba. People are saying get there now before it changes because the Americans are making good relations with the country. So tourism in Easter Island has not peaked yet. It's not been overdeveloped. It's nowhere near a decline. But you get people from Chile coming here, working temporarily, or bringing motorbikes, setting up businesses, or operating as taxis. So I would give Easter Island a snob value of about 8 out of 10. Not 10 out of 10 like Bhutan or Tibet, because the authorities make it very easy for you to come here. It's just the distance and the cost that you're paying for. But the route is fairly easy. It's by plane, and so you have to travel over land through high altitude and freezing cold temperatures. Tourism on Easter Island, eco-style from Turner's Travels. Now it's back to electronic motorbike or electronic bicycle with a top speed of 20 miles an hour. This makes interesting video material. We've got a moai here which had been abandoned during its transportation phase, right at the end of its civilized era. You can see the sea in the background. This moai would have been on its way to one of the coastal au, AHU, meaning a ceremonial platform upon which these moais were erected. Thor Heyerdahl, the great Norwegian explorer from Kon-Tiki and Ra raft fame, he came here and re-erected many of these moai, and my Drake project was mentioned in the same book that he was mentioned, so I was in great company. Not a great explorer like him, but I was in the Rolex 1993 Spirit Award Enterprise book for my project on Sir Francis Drake as a low-key explorer. And coming back to Easter Island, it's been a very enjoyable experience because I'm here purely, or mainly I should say, for making videos. There you have a full view of the quarry. You can see in the higher levels of the volcano the rocks have been chipped away for over 500 years, say from 1000 AD to 1500, to carve those moai, which were transported all around the island. And I'm going to go and see one of the very longest displays of a row of moai.